Welcome, everybody. We will go ahead and get started. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Corliss,
Here.
Halliburton,
Here.
Morales,
Here.
Nash, Stead,
Here.
Willetts. 4 present, 2 absent.
Well, we've got a full work session today. First, we've got, come on up, Sean. Sean Keithley is here. Is Andrea here too, or no, just Sean? Okay. Well, Sean is going to offer an update on the work that he leads. Working and partnering with Andrea Cantor around economic development. We'll start with that before we move into Bree, who will be back with a integrated 5-year work plan for ACHD. And then the last item will be kind of parks creation and planning 101. Sean, thanks for being here. You're not very loud.
Here we are. Okay.
Yeah, I'd lift it so it's easier, just so that if anybody ends up calling in, they can hear you.
Wonderful.
Great.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of the council.
Yeah.
Again, Sean Keithley, Economic Development Director for the City of Boise here in the Mayor's office. It's my absolute pleasure to be here today and to provide an update and overview on economic development here at the City of Boise and what we've been up to recently and what we see as priorities ahead with your guidance. You've heard a few updates and requests for guidance from our team as of late on some very specific issues. And what I'd like to do today is to provide a more high-level overview, zoom out a bit, and talk about what some of our high-level priorities are and have been and what will be going forward. As one of my colleagues mentioned, as I began in this role over 4 years ago, we have an ocean to boil. It's a lot of work. Economic development covers a lot of ground. So I'll do my best to keep it within 20 minutes and leave plenty of time for questions. But I look forward to providing this overview today and the full range of activities that we're engaged in. So I'll talk a little bit about our role, who we are, our mission, our strategic focus, areas of involvement, and what it means to demonstrate leadership to carry out work to support the goal of our leadership to provide opportunity for everyone. I'll talk a little bit about our recent and current work, including some highlighted projects around business retention expansion, and then our broader community leadership work, and then look ahead to what some of our goals are ahead this year and beyond. So who are we? We're nested within the Mayor's office. We're a dynamic team of 2. Myself, as well as Andrea Cantor, our economic development advisor. Being nested within the Mayor's office gives us the opportunity to support and lead as appropriate on projects related to a full range of strategic priorities. And this goes across all of the City for Everyone priorities like housing, mobility, climate, et cetera, that are critical to economic development and creating a city for everyone. Much of our work is external facing, and the trust that we've built and the relationships that we have in the community is extremely important and directly connected to our ability to have success and to position the city for success in the area of economic development. Boiling it down to 3 areas where we have our core roles day to day. It's really oversight of business retention and expansion efforts, as well as business attraction. We're the primary point of contact for businesses large and small, including smallest entrepreneurs and our larger companies. And I'll say what I'll call is a role of being a cross-organizational multi-party convener. Hopefully I can bring some more clarity to those big words in the slides ahead. So before I dive into more about what we do in our role, I'd like to just give a quick set the table snapshot of the Boise economy as it is today. As I'm sure you've all noticed, Boise is growing, but our economy is also balanced and it's positioned for success now and well into the future. In recent years, we've been fortunate enough, for example, to see both strong wage and job growth. In fact, the recent Milken report that came out just this year ranked us 4th among large cities for both of these categories for a period of 2017 to 2022, which is a good sign for long-term success for the city and for the region. Also noted in that report was the metro area experiencing strong wage growth, not just in a few areas, but across the board, 20% wage growth for that period of time between 2017 and 2022 across every major economic sector grouping. Again, suggesting that good fortune is ahead for our city and our region. In those sectors, I'll note as well that services have led the way, especially services for higher wage jobs like the information sector. We've also been fortunate enough to have low regional unemployment, 2.7%, which has held more or less consistent through our recovery from the pandemic, and also happens to lead almost all major cities like us in the Western United States. Our workforce development assets, such as those in higher ed and career technical ed, and apprenticeship programs, and those that support our entrepreneur environment are strong and growing, and those that we actively participate in, things like Trailhead and the Small Business Development Center in partnership with the SBA, for example. One other stat I'll note here is you often hear about who's moving to our region, what that in-migration looks like. And what we've seen recently over the past year has been, if it's any indication, has been encouraging for again, our future ahead as a city. Around 90% of the immigration being folks under 65 years old. So those who are actively in the workforce and who we can probably count on and being part of the workforce for a long time to come. And then I'll mention as well our thriving creative sector. This is an asset that we'll talk about more in the next few minutes, as well as hopefully in the future at another opportunity for engagement. But it's a sector that includes across the board arts and cultural assets, as well as more broadly defined creatives such as those involved in, say, software development. It's something that we've seen a lot of here in our city growing over the past decade or so, and something that we've been happy to be a part of as an office. And then finally, continued high demand for housing. That's more of an indicator than anything, but we certainly see this, especially near commercial centers. And we work hard, both with the public and private sector partners that we work with frequently to support our affordability needs and goals in this area. So with all this as the backdrop, I'd like to talk a little bit about how we actually support that in our strategic and day-to-day work. And fortunately, a lot of this is defined in our strategic plan that we created in 2021 in partnership with a full range of over 100 stakeholders representing businesses, organizations, folks in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, as well as folks within our own organization to help define what it means to build a city for everyone. And through that effort, we created 4 basic pillars that define this and define the work that we do to advance that. That's regional leadership, work to support quality of life, targeted strategic economic development, and then workforce and talent. It's a living document. It's one that's designed to flex with our priorities as times change and as our approaches change, and as our overall leadership priorities change. But most importantly, it requires the support of a broad extended network of partners, both inside and outside of our organization, to be successful. A little bit more detail on what these priorities mean. So regional leadership, that really means showing leadership and support with our regional partners on the key priorities that underscore building this city for everyone. And that's, again, things like housing, transportation, and infrastructure priorities. Quality of life, something that we do with our, again, work with partners like the Capital City Development Corporation, our redevelopment agency, as well as our private sector partners. It also includes things like how we promote messaging around City for Everyone. And that includes the things that we do every day out in the community, as well as more formal efforts like our economic development branding effort that we spent a significant amount of time and energy on last year, which I'll talk a little bit more in a couple of minutes. Strategic economic development, this speaks to our specific focus on industry sectors where we have prioritized our economic development efforts both around expansion as well as attraction of new business. And a little bit about what those sectors are and how they're defined in the plan. We boiled them down to 6 different focus areas. And again, these are things that will probably flex and change over time as our priorities adapt, but begins with our focus on climate and clean energy, tech and advanced manufacturing, creative economy and supporting the cultural sector, elevating those as economic drivers, local food and agriculture, tourism and hospitality. Incidentally, this ranks number 3 for GDP in all of Idaho and represents about a $2 billion direct investment in Southwest Idaho. And then finally, healthcare and life sciences. So those representing the core of our, if you're to define where we're going to spend probably the most energy and the specific sectors that we support, what those are. And then the last pillar, workforce development and talent. And this can sometimes be the stickiest one because not being a workforce development entity ourselves as a city, it's a lot of convening, it's a lot of connecting, amplifying, and understanding with our partners exactly what our assets are in this area and where our workforce stands so that we can best message this to those prospects that we're talking to, or site selectors, for example, that we work with the Boise Valley Economic Partnership and Idaho Department of Commerce. So workforce development and talent, suffice to say, is an area of significant focus, and again, one that requires significant effort with our partners to make sure that we support. So again, briefly, day to day, what this means is oversight of business retention, expansion, traction efforts, being that primary point of contact, relationship manager for businesses and organizations, and then leadership and support of key initiatives and projects. So providing some context into some of our recent work and the metrics around that, just beginning with a few examples of the work that we've been involved with in the past year, and then what's remained pretty well consistent through the past 4 years or so. I'll start with the Economic Development and Branding Project. It's an effort we began last year with a consultant to support our work around telling our story, developing messaging materials, both online and print, and then working with our community engagement office to make that real and make that something that we can deploy so that we can use this in our business attraction efforts and efforts interfacing with our external partners. And it's something that will allow us to be better positioned, for example, if we initiate a campaign, a more formal campaign designed around a specific theme for either something that we already have here in Boise, building upon our existing clusters, or looking at also building upon those clusters and attracting new business. The CHIPS and Micron expansion outreach and support has been an integral part of much of the work that we've done in the past year. We've been very fortunate to be able to do that and to have that opportunity in front of us. It's allowed us to support the expansion, both with the work of our departmental folks here at the city, but also aligning with regional efforts to support those businesses here that will grow along with Micron, and those businesses that will be coming to the city and to the region to help grow, to grow along with that company in the expansion. And it's also supported the community investment framework that speaks to our whole range of priorities around housing, mobility, childcare, and workforce development. Again, it's provided us an opportunity to approach economic development in a whole new way, and to really elevate the priorities that we have as a city, and do that in cooperation with the private sector. Creative economy support. Mentioned this a couple slides ago. This is something we've been doing in close partnership with our friends in arts and history. Part of this was built around this opportunity that we had in the past year for an event called the Cascadia Music Summit, and it was an opportunity that came to us through an organization that typically holds its annual event in Washington, D.C., decided this year for the first time in 20 years to bring that event to Boise. So it was a real opportunity to highlight the music economy, the creative economy here in Boise, and do that alongside some of our partners like Boise State University in particular, and Idaho Music. So That's something that helped us elevate the creative economy priority. We also worked with the film industry and local film stakeholders here in Boise. Andrea Cantor in our office led much of that work, gave us an opportunity to help move some of that work forward and better position ourselves to be a place where film business can grow and thrive, also alongside the newly formed Film Society, for example. And then finally, CCDC and strategic city partnerships that we help lay out in our work with that agency. Much of our role with CCDC is in laying out on a strategic level, high level, how to prioritize some of the key projects that require significant city participation along with the private sector. So our work with them continues along with their continued efforts to define what their, through their independent board, what those projects and initiatives will be. And two others, downtown outreach and vibrancy. I'll underscore the efforts again that Andrea in our office did much of last year. I mean, we've experienced a ton of growth downtown. It's been good fortune for our city. It's also been hard on some of our small businesses. So helping to convene folks around this idea of growing downtown for a better future and the opportunities that lie ahead was an opportunity for us to be involved with our partners like the Downtown Boise Association and CCDC and local businesses to help talk through some of those impacts, focus on the broader vision and hopefully mitigate some of that as they work through it and put some tangible actions on the table. And then finally, support for entrepreneurship. We work closely with Trailhead, for example, with the Boise State Venture College and our local business accelerator, the Small Business Development Accelerator just down the street here on Idaho Street. That's part of a lease that we have with them. So needless to say, strongly connected to the entrepreneur community and the work that they do. Also, I'd be remiss not to mention Boise Entrepreneur Week and all the work that we do to help support that as well. So a few results and metrics around this. And I am always careful to couch whatever numbers I put up here and tangible results that we have around things like jobs with the fact that this is not something that we do alone. In fact, it's often not possible for us to do a lot of this alone. We work very closely with our partners to and work hard to make these types of results and opportunities happen. So I think I can say along with that couching that conservatively we've worked to support the creation of over 1,000 new high quality jobs in Boise over the past year, and it's something that we can provide more detail and certainty around in the year ahead as we work with our partners to make these things real. Generally, they're mostly office positions, and they include future and planned expansions in Boise. We also see strong potential, of course, for the continued growth of suppliers and other companies that are aligned with the Micron expansion. And that those that support the semiconductor industry generally. Finally, I'll note as well that over the past 5 years or so, we've worked with our partners that are part of development agreements on city-owned land, both in the Eisenman area, the Eisenman industrial area, that the city-owned land and development agreement that's part of that, as well as the airport industrial area, and contributed to the development of over 800,000 square feet of new industrial space on those lands. Okay, so finally, talking about our work, again, metrics around some of the work that we've done around outreach and engagement. We've, in the past year, directly engaged over 75 employers. These have included focus groups that were part of our branding effort, as well as work that we did with the downtown construction mitigation and parking efforts, and targeted business visits that we've worked with city leadership to accomplish. We've also been involved in a whole range of events, and this is part of the fun work that we do. We get to be in front of organizations that want to partner with the city and highlight our support of various initiatives. And this has ranged from things like the Cascadia Music Summit that I mentioned, trade shows like Semicon West, which supports semiconductor industry and expansion around that. And then my favorite, my teammate Andrea participated in a fireside chat at the Flicks with George Prentice on the film ordinance around the holidays. That was a lot of fun. So we've been privileged to do this work, again, in partnership with our broad range of folks out in the community. I serve on around 8 different boards and committees around town that help us stay close to our work and help build and maintain those strong networks. A few of those are the Boise Valley Economic Partnership, the Downtown Boise Association, the Chamber, recently the Boise State Arts Action and Advisory Council, and several others. So looking ahead to 2024 and beyond, we are looking forward to continue to demonstrate leadership and carrying out the work that tells the Boise story. Again, continuing that branding effort that we initiated last year, supporting workforce development and entrepreneurship, fostering urban vibrancy through strong partnerships through our work with the DBA and other folks, and working with our partners to focus on the intentional planning of infrastructure and development, especially areas like the Gateway East Urban Renewal District, where a lot of that is key to the development that will happen in the future, but also downtown as we close out with CCDC a couple urban renewal districts and work with them on the future of things like State Street. And then finally, of course, supporting small business. A lot of this happening through policy and code improvements, similar to some of the items that you've seen come before you in the last couple of weeks. So with that, I will again express my gratitude and thanks for being able to share this with you today, and pause for any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I have a few questions, Sean. First, thank you so much for the presentation, and you have congrats to you and Andrea. There have been some great wins for you recently. I think the expansion of the available industrial space is a huge win for Boise, and obviously so is the Micron project. I had a few questions. What are the, for the most part, are the suppliers that are coming to support Micron, are they coming in temporarily during the physical expansion process, or are they long-term suppliers that will reside here as long as Micron is?
Madam Mayor, Council Pro Tem Stead, it's the answer is both. We're seeing plenty of activity right now, of course, on the construction side, but I think when you look to the numbers that were presented by Micron initially when the expansion was announced, so the 2,000 permanent jobs and the 15,000 ancillary jobs, the idea was that those ancillary jobs would be here to stay. So they would be growing along with the company, and these are long-term investments that are happening over the next decade. They're not all coming tomorrow, but these are jobs that are projected to grow along with that expansion.
Thank you.
I'll just jump in there too. I mean, it's really interesting. There are many suppliers that are here already, because Micron's here and they're small and they're looking to expand. So we visited just recently a company called Photronics. They have built their facility out by Micron. We've all probably driven by it and not realized that they were there and that they had their own clean room as well with lots of people. Oh, no, I'm forgetting the word. They're super cool, really expensive
Photomasks.
That's right. That they're building there, and they've put in an application for CHIPS funding as well, with the hopes of expanding and almost doubling their workforce. And we've visited other suppliers as well that are looking at doing the same. So it's both suppliers that exist that will grow, as well as the need to encourage other suppliers to come in and then be here long term.
Thank you. Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
So I wondered, we hear a lot, I know the city has some goals for mixed use spaces for development around the city, but also we hear a lot from developers that mixed use they're not filling those spaces, that housing is really, and obviously we need housing too. But do you, I guess, is there a need that you hear about for those smaller commercial or retail spaces that would be included with those kinds of mixed use developments? Or is it, would you echo the sentiment that those are hard to fill right now and aren't the best use of our space? And then I guess kind of piggybacking off of that, do you have any stats on primarily, I guess, downtown office vacancy? Are we seeing, are they full? Where are we with that kind of a thing? Thanks, Sean.
Sure, Madam Mayor, Council Pro Tem Stead. So a couple things. One of the interesting things that came out of the pandemic was growth in co-working space. So we saw strong growth both at Trailhead, for example, as well as other co-working spaces that have popped up around Boise and around the Valley. And one of the things that could theoretically happen as entrepreneurs have filled those spaces and for whatever reason have started to pursue their own thing, their own gig, is to expand into brick and mortar spaces as their operations grow. So I think that theoretically there's good potential for that space that might be vacant around town. Another interesting note is I know in the new zoning code, the language around the type of space that is used for ground floor retail or office, I believe is more broadly defined now as active ground floor uses. So that could also expand the range of types of uses that go into those spaces and perhaps enable folks to think more creatively about what could happen on those ground floors. And then the second question about metrics around office vacancies. So we've been fortunate in Boise to have a very low office vacancy post-pandemic. I mean, compared to other cities around the West, for example, I think we sit around 7 or 8% right now, which is actually, as I understand, pretty healthy. And I know, for example, in the 10th and Bannock building that went up right after, right during the pandemic, that was actually leased out very quickly. I mean, and I don't want to speak out of turn, I think it was around 100%. It was almost full occupancy. So we've been well positioned as a community, I think. Much credit to the strength of our downtown and the long-term efforts that have gone into making that a vibrant place where people want to be. It's more about the place. And that continues to attract folks to be in an office and be in an area where they want to be that feels vibrant and thriving. Of course.
Madam Mayor? Yeah, Sean, thank you very much for the presentation and the work you and Andrew are doing. It's a lot of work for a department of two. So my hat's off to both of you. Kind of a follow-up question with Councilmember Stead and thinking about Micron that provides a lot of high-paying jobs into the Valley that ripples into these suppliers that are also going to be supporting, some of which are here and some of which have maybe they're supporting from other locations and would like to attract them here. Are we proactively looking to bring some of those ancillary supporting suppliers into Boise?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Corliss, absolutely. We have, and to answer this in a way that I think reflects some of what I was talking about earlier, the work that we do with organizations like the Boise Valley Economic Partnership and Idaho Department of Commerce and other allied organizations like that that are part of this extended network that we have and that also have tools like the incentive program that are held within Commerce allows us to proactively look at those opportunities and hopefully make fruit of some of them. The BVEP, the Boise Valley Economic Partnership, has a pretty comprehensive list of prospects that are, quote, waiting in the wings. And also proactively, along with Idaho Commerce, primarily go to site selector meetings, trade shows. I know the folks at Commerce recently went to Singapore. We're planning again on going to the Semicon West trade show in San Francisco in July, I believe, which we did last year with our partners from Commerce, BVEP, folks from Syracuse, and about 20 other folks here in Boise. So we do proactively identify those prospects and go after them.
That's terrific to hear. Thanks, Sean. And just one more follow-up question. And, as our roles on city council here, well, I won't speak for everyone else, but I would like to offer, if you see that there are areas or roles that we can help fill, not just with Micron, but any type of the economic development, would love to hear those ideas and
Madam
how
Mayor,
we can
Councilmember-
help.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Councilmember Corliss. We deeply appreciate that offer and look forward to continued collaboration.
Madam Mayor, I have a question. Sean, thanks for the presentation. I would like to ask you about childcare, and perhaps this deserves a greater discussion. I had someone say that the state that figures out childcare will be the economic leader of the United States. And I believe that for a lot of different reasons. As we try to attract businesses and folks to our great city, can you talk to us a little bit about what they're saying about that and what ideas they have to help increase access to childcare in Boise?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Willetts, thank you for that question. It's certainly a question that was highlighted by our Economic Recovery Task Force, which we initiated right after the pandemic hit, and continue to be something that we elevated as part of the outgrowth of that work and integrated into our strategic plan. I know that it directly became part of the work that was done to help streamline our licensing process, for example, and to look at ways that we could expand opportunity for folks here in Boise to offer childcare, especially smaller childcare providers. We've also worked alongside, I'll just use Micron as an example, companies to look to ways to how they can provide childcare near the site. To your point, I mean, this is absolutely something that companies look at as a economic development, call it an incentive, or call it a means by which that they may not otherwise be able to do business. It's a tremendous asset for attracting their workforce and retaining their workforce. So working with companies like Micron to establish centers proximate to their operation and in partnership with organizations like the YMCA in that case, to help further that goal. So I will say that we will continue to look to opportunities as we work with other employers that have similar needs and look to creative ways to partner with our allied organizations to make those kinds of things happen, recognizing how critical of a need it is.
And I'll just pick up too, that could be something that we discuss further. I know Councilmember Morales has that as a priority. Kate Nelson joining Sean and Andrea, I think would be a great combination of folks to talk about what we've done and more about what we're hearing from businesses. And here I'm talking off the cuff and not remembering all the names of things, but I do want to highlight the child care center that will be at Franklin and Orchard that is in the affordable housing neighborhood that's being built it'll house 89 kiddos. It's being run by Giraffe Laugh. But what I think is really cool is they've developed a partnership with Future School and maybe Boys and Girls Club employees, so that there will be an opportunity for those employees to have their kids there. And with Micron setting the example of a new employer, I mean, St. Luke's has done it, Boise State does it, but an employer that's building a new childcare, I'm optimistic that we will see more businesses responding to the need in the market and do the same, but definitely working to kind of raise the bar. It was part of our Economic Recovery Task Force, as well as it was the #1 recommendation that came out of my transition committees 4 years ago as new mayor, the Economic Development Committee. It was the #1 issue at that point for them. All right, thank you, Sean, so much. And Andrea, raise your hand, please. I don't know if everybody's had the chance to meet Andrea, so just wanted to thank her and acknowledge her for her work as well. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you very much.
All right. Got Bree Brush. And then Christy Inselman is here from ACHD. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. Bree's here to present some staff recommendations on 5-year work plan. Look forward to hearing everybody's thoughts and suggestions.
Sean is way taller than I am. Thank you,
need
Madam
my
Mayor,
little stool.
Council. All right. Madam Mayor, Council members, like the Mayor said, I'm here before you this afternoon to talk about our requests for ACHD's integrated 5-year work plan, and we have some guests to help us facilitate that conversation. But I'll also just mention today too, even though I'm the one up here presenting this to you, there are a lot of folks who have their hands and fingerprints on this list, and they're over here. Deanna, Tessa, and Dane, looking at how our projects align with our comp plan, our pathways plan, our active transportation network, partner agency work, things like that. So I'll start by saying that. So we'll go through a brief introduction with Christy from ACHD, and then we'll get into the project map, and I'll go through our program projects and then our newly requested projects and share our schedule for next steps in the input process. But first, Christy. And Rebecca Phillips from ACHD is also here, and she'll be staying with us for the entire presentation.
Just kidding. So good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. For the record, my name is Christy Enselman, and I am the planning supervisor at Ada County Highway District. And it is under my group and under myself and Rebecca Phillips that the integrated 5-year work plan gets developed each year. So Bree asked me to come by and kind of give you an overview of the process for the integrated 5-year work plan. So this is just a very brief overview of what goes into this. There are a lot of elements that go into the development of this plan. It is an annual report. This is something that we update every single year. So obviously every year we're completing projects and we're needing to move new projects into the integrated 5-year work plan. So this is done in close coordination with our cities. We reach out to all of our partner agencies, which include all 6 cities, the county, all school districts, Boise State University, and VRT. They are all partners that we reach out and request prioritization list from. As you can probably guess, we get a lot of requests. I think last year between all of our partner agencies alone, this is not what the public has requested or other projects that have been identified through other sources, we had over 800 project requests just from our partner agencies. So when we're developing the integrated 5-year work plan, it does kind of start with our cities and their comprehensive plan. It is the cities and the county that set that land use vision for Ada County. And that does tie directly into the communities in motion, which we get down into the demographics and travel demand model and projections on the arterial and local networks. And that ties into our strategic plan. This is kind of like a flow chart, if you would, of all of the different things that do inform how the integrated 5-year work plan is developed. And then those from the strategic plan, we do kind of split out into our asset management, ADA plan, bike master plan, neighborhood plans, and capital improvement plans. So there's a lot of plans that go into this. They all have their different functions for project identification and roles within the integrated 5-year work plan development. So CIP is our capital improvement plan. That is our 20-year horizon for the arterial roadway and intersection network. And that is where we derive our impact fee funding is from that CIP plan. But that is meant to be a forecasted need of projects over the next 20 years. Our neighborhood plans we divided the entire Ada County into 16 neighborhood planning areas. And this actually started about 12 years ago. Each year we would do about 2 plans, and the purpose of the neighborhood plan is a project identification tool where we went out to those particular areas, reached out to the public, what were the needs of their community, and we divided it up so they could focus on their community area. And we also do larger focuses, but that's what the neighborhood plans are. So it started in 2012. All 16 neighborhood planning areas now have an adopted neighborhood plan. And now we are in the process of going back. The plan is to go out every 10 years and reach back out to the public. Last year, it was the Meridian Downtown and the Boise West Bench were the neighborhood planning areas that were adopted just in January, actually, of 24. Our bike master plan is where we have pretty much a gigantic slate. So it's every arterial roadway is identified in that plan, as well as our low stress bikeway network that we identified throughout entire Ada County. So it's connecting the community. Arterials aren't always the most comfortable facilities for a cyclist. So we found that the low stress bikeway network was a really great addition to that. So that's a place where we get projects. Our ADA plan where we literally have an inventory of pretty much every pedestrian ramp in the entire county, whether they are ADA compliant, if they're a high priority to be replaced. So that's where some of our projects come, as well as asset management, right? We have a lot of roadways, we have a lot of bridges, we have a lot of signals, and we have to maintain the system that we currently have. So a large part of our integrated 5-year work plan involves that. So the plan itself includes, it's broken up into programs. Some of those we don't ask our partner agencies to prioritize for us. Those would fall under like our asset management component, so bridges. If a bridge needs to be replaced, it needs to be replaced. That's not really something we say, hey, is that important to the city? It is, because it needs to be replaced. If our, asphalt is crumbling, those are projects that we add, and those are asset management. So ones that we have requested all of our partner agencies focus on are 2 categories, and those are the road and intersection projects. So the CIP, major arterial network, and then our community programs. Some roads actually would fall under community programs because they're locals or they're collector roads, even though we're redoing the entire roadway. So that's what we do ask our partner agencies to focus on every single year. And then once we receive those lists from our partner agencies, they go through a prioritization process where we rank them. That doesn't mean that the number one project is the one that goes in. It's a guiding tool that we use. Obviously, our partners may tell us this is more important, even though it's ranked number 25. So we do look at that. So within that project prioritization, every project is a 100-point scale. So if it's a sidewalk request on a local roadway, there's 100 points that are assigned to it. 15 of those points are the partner agency requests. So a large chunk of that comes from you. Is it part of a school walk route? It gets a lot of points for that. Is it identified in the neighborhood plan or in one of our other plans? It gets points for that. So there's certain criteria that we utilize, both roads and intersections and community programs projects. So once we receive those back from you, we will rank them, and that will help guide us in the development of the plan. As far as looking forward for the integrated 5-year work plan on timing, so we're in early stages. We're looking for your requests. Once we get those, we will build a draft plan over the next few months. It'll take us a couple months to do the prioritization, and we're happy to share the results of that prioritization. And obviously, that's all projects. We don't rank just Boise projects against Boise projects. We rank all projects against all projects. And we're happy to share that with you guys as well. It'll take a couple months. We're going to go back to our commission in May with those results. And then we'll build the draft plan. And we're anticipated to have that draft mid-July, which we notify your staff, let them know, draft plan. It kind of opens up another review period from our partner agencies, where you can review the plan. Did we miss the mark? Are there projects you would still like to see? You have another opportunity to communicate to the commission and to staff on any changes or recommended changes you would have to the plan. Our target date for adoption is September. So we're going to have several touch points with our commission along the way before adoption. Our integrated 5-year work plan is tied directly to our budget. So I always like to reference that as well. So in August, our budget is set for the next 2 years, and that informs our integrated 5-year work plan as well. So we don't control. I wish we controlled all of it. No. So what the integrated 5-year work plan does is it expends the capital funds, not the operational funds for ACHD. So you'll see two groups of money when we adopt a budget, but it's the capital budget that the integrated 5-year work plan is formed around. And that's kind of in a nutshell. I know I talked really fast. I tend to do that, so I do apologize. But I am here for any questions. I'll be here for a little bit. I am double booked this evening. There's multiple agencies that have work sessions on the prioritization. So Rebecca Phillips will stay as well to answer any follow-up questions that you guys may have. But I'm up here now if you've got any questions. Otherwise, I'll turn it back over to Bree. And thank you for inviting us. We love to partner with you guys.
I have questions. Thank you so much. You have a very hard job.
Thank you.
I understand that.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Trust me, there are so many projects. I'm like, it is such a good project, but then, funding always comes in the way.
I appreciate
Yes.
that there are a lot of items on the Christmas list.
Yes.
And just looking at the city of Boise's alone, I want every one of them done. I need clarity because ACHD is a separate elected
Mhm.
organization. So we can create our Christmas list here and submit it to ACHD, but at the end of the day, they're Santa Claus, correct? They decide.
Madam Mayor, Councilwoman Willetts, yes.
Okay.
They ultimately, the integrated 5-year work plan, the budget, they are approved by the ACHC Commission.
And in your follow-up, okay. In your experience, how many changes occur at the commissioner level in terms of prioritization once everyone in Ada County gives their Christmas list to them?
Councilwoman Willetts, it does, we definitely look to, once the draft comes out, I can't think of a year since I've been back at ACHE. I can't think of a year that we didn't get a letter from one of our partner agencies that said, we reviewed the draft, but here's 3 items we really wish you guys would either accelerate or maybe add to the plan or something along those lines, that we weren't at least responsive to part of it. I can't think of a time that we received a letter like that. Obviously, adding a project into the integrated 5-year work plan, there are other steps. Sometimes it's not easy to add it immediately. Sometimes there are steps that have to be taken to even cost estimate on a project. We have a scoping effort that Rebecca and I also do in addition to the integrated 5-year work plan. So we scope a whole bevy of projects every single year. And the purpose of that is to vet the project. Is it feasible? What are the improvements we're looking to garner on this particular? Is it traffic calming, sidewalk? What is a signal project? And then we work with a consultant, we come up with a cost estimate. Because really before we can say it fits within our budget or it fits within, the parameters of the dollars we have set, we have to know how much it's going to cost. So sometimes we have to say that is great. We will look, maybe we'll add that to our scoping effort. So sometimes the response isn't add it to the plan. Sometimes the response is we'll add it to this effort and work on getting it into the plan. So it's a lot of shuffling sometimes. And then there are some projects where I think there was a request on the letter last year. We did add the project in and we bumped it up a couple years. It wasn't in there. Bumped it up a couple years to get a concept level started on it because it's going to be a very complicated project. So a concept level is a much more in-depth review of a project, a lot of public outreach, multiple alternatives are developed. So there's different ways. So sometimes in a roundabout way to answer that question, sometimes we do try to be very responsive to our partners.
Thank you. You all have a very hard job. I recognize that. I'm seeking clarity because you have lots of folks who desperately need projects in a growing area. So thank you.
Madam Mayor, I might kind of follow up similar to that question. I could probably come up with about like 25 different projects for you all that we could just add to the list, but that's probably not very realistic if every single one of us were adding, 25 additional projects. So when we look at our good list that we have right here and we're talking about changing or adding more things to it, realistically, is there lots of projects that we can add, or is it a pretty small amount where we really need to figure out like what are the few projects that we can add to this list at this point? Like, how do we determine that?
Madam Mayor, Councilman Halliburton, it depends on what you're adding to. So there's 2 lists you have in front of you. One is the projects that are programmed. So those are going to be, the intent of that list is so we have a very clear idea of what of the programmed are a priority for you. And then there's going to be one that's projects not in the list yet. So every jurisdiction is a little bit different on how many they give us. The number of projects that we can add realistically each year is not huge. So we're not going to be able to add 25 projects, but sometimes our partners use that list as their own kind of like record keeping of what's up and coming of projects that are high priorities for them. So I'm not going to tell you guys how many to add to your list. We try not to. It's your list. We just try to be the purveyors of that information and do with it as much as we can. But we would never say you're limited to only 20 because that's not always realistic either. So if I saw a list with 60 on it, I'm not going to have a heart attack. If I saw a list with 250, I might have a slight heart attack.
So in other words, it's sort of our job to figure out like what's a realistic amount to put on there. And when we are requesting things, there's a chance it's going to make it onto a program list, but then there's also a chance it's going to live on a not program list. And even though it's on that not program list, if a project comes up, it's still nice to have some of those things on there so we can identify potential projects there, even if it's not in the programming phase.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we also, your list, we also share internally. I'm sure Bree maybe have briefed you on our safety team that's been developing over the last year or so. So sometimes if we have some projects that we can implement very quickly, if there's a noted safety concern on a particular intersection, unfortunately, we've had a horrible year. That safety team was developed for that. So those would be projects, and so we share your list with that. So they also can glean and maybe pull some projects off of there to implement through that avenue. So there's a bunch of different ways. So information is very helpful for
Good.
us. Yes.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to know, just to stick with Councilwoman Willitz's theme here, how magical the ACHD elves are. So if we want to get a request on our draft, do we already have to have easements, land? Like if we're talking new roads and it's owned by a private landowner, those could go on the request list as well.
Madam Mayor, Councilman Morales, yes. So that's one of the things that we vet out through the scoping is we identify how many parcels would be impacted, what kind of right of way would we need to acquire for that. So no, we do all that work. So if there's a particular roadway, maybe an extension or whatever it may be, that can go on the list and we vet that out for you. Again, it may not be something that goes on right away. We may have to scope it first, but yeah.
Madam Mayor?
Sure, I'll take one more and then I'm going to ask that I think Bree's
Sorry.
specific
I think
recommendations
I've hijacked her
Okay.
will shed light
presentation.
on some of this too. So I'll take one more and then we'll go to Bree.
And this would be a real quick question. On some of the improvements that maybe are adding sidewalks and signals for crossing, can we add on projects that are maybe just a portion of that project, like a signal?
Madam Mayor, Councilman Corliss, yes, we typically like to implement if you're talking about a project that's on like a large arterial roadway and there's a request for like a crossing on that corridor and maybe the road isn't ready to be widened yet. We do have some of our partners that will say we would like this to be implemented before the roadway gets done. And there is a section on the list that you guys give us on what the agency is asking for. And we generally tell our partners more information is better. So if you detail out in there that we would like to see this pedestrian crossing before the road widening happens, it can be a standalone project and we can put it on there, whether it gets implemented before the road. Obviously, how the chips may fall, but we've had some that do that. They'll say maybe we want an interim improvement, maybe a asphalt pathway before something else happens. So yes, they can be split up. They're more cost effective to the public and the taxpayers if we do projects cohesively. That's why we also have as part of our asset maintenance or asset management, our maintenance programs, a lot of tongue twisters. Within those, we have a go in once philosophy. So if we have a roadway that needs a complete rehab, we're also evaluating, is there sidewalk missing? Is there a crossing needed? What are the ped ramps like? And so we want to do it all at once because it is more cost effective to do it that way. But if you're asking for a crossing and the road isn't even on the CIP, then that one maybe we would do before. So it just depends. But yes. That help? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Christy.
That was great. Took up a bunch of my time and explained like half of the things I was going to, so that's perfect. Then I don't have to do it. So I passed out some spreadsheets, and that's the form that we are given by ACHD to input our information in. So it has some of those pieces that Christy mentioned where we can provide detail as well as the location of the project. And then we do our own internal prioritization too that I'll talk about in a moment. But just to give you an idea, highlighted here, this is not exhaustive, but this is mostly what I'm going to talk about today. And I'm going to talk about them in this order, starting with completed projects, going into programmed projects that might already have a year, and then finally sharing the requested projects and how we've prioritized them. So completed or near construction, hopefully you've gotten a chance to see some of these in action. We have first up the 11th Street Bikeway, obviously a significant investment. And there were two different portions. There was a CCDC portion within the Urban Renewal District, and then there was an ACHD portion as well. Also on here, I'll call out is the traffic calming project on Kootenai, but not to be forgotten, it was also a project to add curb, gutter, and sidewalk, new ramps, and traffic signals on Kootenai. In our programmed projects list, so these are projects that already have a year assigned for something, most likely, whether it's design, right-of-way acquisition, or even if they have a concept study, it'll go on the programmed project side. So first on here, I have 5th and 6th Street corridor, which could see construction as early as this summer, regardless of if it's configured as a one-way or two-way street. There's a lot of pavement maintenance and ramp upgrades and stormwater work that needs to happen on this corridor, so that is coming up very quickly. Collister Drive improvements. This was a huge effort in recent years by the commission and ACHD staff and city staff with the neighborhood to come up with a really exciting concept for Collister Drive and safety improvements to that. Finally, the Eckert Bridge, which is shown on here. It's obviously a very narrow bridge. I received some feedback from Councilmember Morales before. I really appreciate that. So we're looking at a concept study for that beginning in 2024. The last couple within our program projects that I'll highlight are, oh wait, I skipped over a slide. I'm sorry. We also have the 5-mile overpass in design. That's the photo here on the screen. This bridge is very old. It's one of the last original overpasses of I-84, and it's very dangerous for pedestrian cyclists, but it's also pretty congested for vehicle commuters as well. This will be a major project with a partnership between ACHD and ITD, and the estimate is around 20+ million for replacement. So there'll be more opportunities to weigh in on that over the coming years. And then the Capitol Boulevard project also on here, beginning design next year. We've worked closely with Boise State on this, and it's on their list as well. So one of the things Christy mentioned is they solicit input from all of the agencies. So we submit a list, school districts, Boise State, and oftentimes beforehand, we'll try to meet with other peers, either in our city or even in neighboring cities, and ask like, what's on your list? What's a high priority for you? And so that's another way we get projects on our list that are highlighted for mutually beneficial entities. And then now the last couple to highlight within our program projects are State Street and 15th and 16th Street. State Street has a number of different segments, I think you can see on that spreadsheet, that are programmed in upcoming years. And this corridor is also really unique because you'll see many that have a future designation next to it. And that's because as part of the regional planning for State Street, all of the entities involved agreed that some improvements and some investments would have to be sequenced either with development or traffic growth or ridership growth on the bus route. So they're designated as future, but we all acknowledge that they're going to happen sometime. And then 15th and 16th Street here came up in your joint meeting a couple weeks ago. They're doing some really exciting rapid projects. The safety team is on this corridor, but there's a lot more that could be done. And there is a concept study for this, but it's looking out into 2027, 2028. I'll pause here because I think I know we have some comments on this one from last week.
Yeah, Madam Mayor Bree, thank you for bringing that up. Looking at this on the list, I think right now it's priority number 20. If you're trying to sort through where it's at it's easier on the online than it is, but it's on one of the last pages here. There's a couple things I just want to make sure that we have clear as far as what our asks are on there. Because right now I think it's asking for a concept study between State Street and Emerald. And I think we want to make sure that that's expanded to Fort Street. And we want to make sure when they're doing the concept study that they're evaluating the possibility of a two-way conversion so that they've got instructions to do that. And then I think right now it just says bicycle improvements, but there's quite a few pedestrian improvements on there as well. And I think it's more focused on currently that really weird, these are my words, not what's listed on there, weird intersection where there's 5 lanes coming in at 16th and like Maine and Idaho, and there's no real way to cross the street on the westbound area. So I think that whole corridor, we want to make sure that we're doing pedestrian and bicycle and traffic calming improvements. And I just want to make sure that when we have that listed on there, that one, we've got the right length Fort all the way to Emerald, so that if there is a two-way conversion, that it actually includes both sides of the one-way. And then we're looking at safety improvements along both sides of the corridor. Right now, it's listed as kind of priority number 20. We just heard that it kind of falls into, when they're doing a lot of their work over at ACHD. I do hope one of the results from our traffic fatality review board is that we do receive lots of data about where high dangerous roads and intersections are, that we can use some of that data to inform some of where our priorities are. We have another meeting coming up here soon. So before I think it's adopted completely, I think it's worth taking a look at our priority projects. I'm guessing they're going to be
Just to
identified
clarify, you have another safety task force meeting
in March.
coming soon? Okay.
Yep.
I wasn't sure what you were talking about.
Yeah, safety task force
Okay.
meeting in March. But that we do sort of like look through a lens of where are we seeing high volumes of crashes and dangerous roads. And I guarantee you that those projects are already requested, but it might help us prioritize those with ACHD when we look at them.
Madam Mayor, council member, that's really helpful feedback. We can add that in the descriptor there. I will clarify too that our programmed projects don't even though they're in order here, that's not the numerical order. It might just be the year that they're targeted. So it's falling towards the end because it's in 2027. But one thing we can do when we submit our comments to ACHD is call that out and say that this project, this is why it's really important to us, and we can add some of the feedback that you've shared.
Perfect. That's helpful. And I know it's on their radar as well. I think they're just looking for a little bit of clear direction from us, and including the length, and then also the request to evaluate two-way, I think will be helpful for them.
Absolutely.
Madam Mayor, I just wanted to add that I support accelerating this, the project here too with 15th and 16th. And also, Bree, can you clarify, how does this support the information that we heard at the joint planning session about 15th and 16th and the pedestrian infrastructure they were going to put in with the beacons and things like that? Is that before this happens? That's more, they're hoping to do that more quickly.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Stead, those are things they can go in and do immediately. They're starting work soon, and it'll stay within, they're able to do those quickly because it'll stay within the footprint of the road that exists today. And this road in particular is more than 60 feet. You have 3 11-foot lanes, you have a bike lane, you have a parking lane. So there is a lot of space to work within, and they can do improvements like that and not risk having to come and rip it out later because the footprint is pretty large.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor. Bree, couple questions. You also have a hard job. This is not easy. And thank you for the paper, the old-fashioned paper. So I want to make sure that I understand here. So this is the Christmas list we've already asked for.
Yes.
The question is, do we want to put any extra stars? We've been really good, move this up. And this is the things we want to add to our Christmas list. And you probably are already going to do this, but can you tell us about the priority ranking?
Yes, absolutely. Those are going to be next, but at risk of oversimplifying it, yes, the programmed ones are ones that are already in there. We have an opportunity to revisit those and say, is this timing still working with city projects, with development, whatever there is that might else be going on? We can evaluate it and decide whether it's still appropriate. But I'll get into the request list next. Christy went into this, so I'll skip over this, but just knowing the difference between roads and intersections and community programs, primarily funding, sometimes scale, not always. Typically, we'll submit our list and then they'll tell us whether it's in the right category or not, but that'll get sorted out. How we evaluate them as a city staff, we look at safety, so looking at crashes that occur on the corridor, looking at connections to active transportation and transit nearby, proximity to a school, to a neighborhood activity center, and then community feedback we get through the comment tool. ACHD's comment tool feedback comes right to us, so we can see the same thing that they're seeing. They're seeing 10 residents commenting on one project. We see that too, and we can put that high up on their list, and it might end up high on the prioritization in the end as well because of that.
Madam Mayor,
our-
just a quick question, or just a quick comment. I noticed on this, on the wish list, that there was a focus on heavy pedestrian areas next to schools and making sure that there were sidewalks and places for kids and parents to be able to walk to school safely. And I also appreciated on the Christmas list next to Centennial because you've got 500 kids in cars trying to leave at the same time. So I appreciate that that is a focus of the city, because to Councilmember Halliburton's comment, there's so much opportunity there to have accidents because there's so many people right at once. So thank you for putting that higher in the priority, because I think it really matters.
Thank you. First, in our roads and intersection category, we have less in here because there's less that's generally eligible for this. And like I said, later we might get told, oh, actually, this is better as a community program. We're going to move it over there, and that's completely fine. But this is where we start. So two of these, the two Boise Ave ones, came from our discussions with Boise State and many years of planning that they have done around the campus to facilitate students getting on campus. And of course, we need our residents to be able to get to and through campus possibly. And then number 2 on here is the Warm Springs Ave, Highway 21 to Park Center. This is something that was identified in the Barber Valley neighborhood plan that Christy mentioned, some of the planning efforts that go on. This was identified as a possible project, and it was highly ranked. So that's what we're looking at here. The photo here is Capitol, Boise Ave, and Yale. It says Lusk on the photo. I'm not sure why, but this is for intersection reconfiguration and installation of a crossing here that would go through Yale. So you can see there's a lot of infrastructure already in place. It would be a pretty significant project. So we're trying to figure out a better way for people to get through there. Community program requests. This is in the wish list. This is where we have the most prioritization ability. So I pulled out a couple here from our top 10, and I'll go through those, and then I'll go through a few more. But in the top 10, this happens to be our number 1. I listed a number 1, but the Orchard Street Corridor Plan. This is a new request, and it will technically be a joint effort between the city and ACHD for us to establish a collective vision, both for land use and for transportation on Orchard. This is a corridor plan that we would actually initiate as a city, but because of the close support we'd want from ACHD for a traffic study component and perspective, we thought it was significant enough of an ask of them to submit it as a request here. So this is the first time in a while we've probably submitted a request like this where we're requesting their participation, heavy participation in an effort that we're doing. Boise Ave Bike Facilities. This one is referencing a segment near BSU that was recently restriped, and we think it could be an interesting pilot area for hard delineators that we're seeing applied throughout the city. So this could be a good corridor for that. Finally, on here, the Amity Road pathway. That's the image on the slide here. There's a gap between Federal Way, which is on the left of your screen, or the south, between the sidewalk that ends there and what picks up on the other side toward the neighborhood and going toward the green belt. The grade, the presence of a bridge, and the utility constraints on the corridor show a project that might look simple, but it is not very easy. So it is in our top 10, and we're excited to have this on here this year. It's a new request. Also in our top 10, improved bicycle facilities on 5 Mile from Overland to Victory. This connects to a library, several grocery stores, a nearby low-stress bikeway that ACHD is already investing in, and a few elementary schools. Cole from McMullen to Emerald is shown on the screen here. This is a high-stress segment for all roadway users, but especially bike peds. But it facilitates important connections to transit and the mall, which is nearby, and a couple middle school and high schools. So we thought it was important to have some kind of improved connection here for safety reasons. And then the last one on here is Maple Grove, Ustick to Edna, sidewalk and bike lane improvements. This segment goes all the way down to the Greenbelt at a point, but there is a gap that we'd like to fill to help make that continuous connection as safe as possible. Going into our projects that are between rankings 10 and 21, a couple to highlight. Fairview and 25th, that's the photo on the screen. That's signalization of this intersection. This is looking out from the St. Luke's development, and as you all might be aware, there's a lot of development and redevelopment occurring in this corridor, but there are not many crossing opportunities for people on foot or on bike. So we'd like to see some kind of study here to consider a crossing. And then the Garden Street Bikeway, I didn't change this, but earlier today, we heard from ECHD that they're including this in a scoping effort already. So just calling it out as something that can happen, they could expand the scope of a different project and pick up one more. So this will be a sidewalk project that gets picked up through the Garden Street Bikeway project that's already going. Finally, looking even further to the west, projects to highlight between 10 and 21 on McMillan in West Boise to upgrade the sidewalk in this section to be consistent with a detached sidewalk and a multi-use path that is on either side of this image of the stars on the photo here. And then continuation of the Shamrock Bikeway, which ACHD has already heavily invested in, but it facilitates further connections in the west and as you get closer to I-84. Next steps, Tessa and I and the team will take all of the input you gave us today to update our list, make adjustments, and then submit it to ACHD by the due date, which is next Friday. If you think of any other comments or have any more to share with me today, we'll make sure they'll reflect it on our list. If you can get them to us by this Friday, that would be ideal. And then we'll get comments back from them. They'll look at them and say, maybe this should be scoped through this project, or maybe this can be included with another project, or they can assign a year to it if it's that simple. But then we'll have another opportunity, like Christy said, to comment on their feedback and make any adjustments or requested changes. That period will open in the late summer before the plan is adopted by the commission in September. Any questions?
Thanks. Before I take questions, I just want to thank Bree for this work. It's both the work of many people before us that, have gotten things into the programming list, and then collaborative work too with the agency. This is intended to be, with the agency, a very collaborative process. And so our team will take the stuff that they hear today, try to work things through, as Bree said, get to ACHD, but we'll have another opportunity as well to weigh in and then provide some official comments on it.
Madam Mayor, just a quick comment. Yeah, I want to thank Bree and ACHD as well. One of the pages that you didn't bring up in the conversation were all the completed projects. And like we haven't seen those before at that level in the past. And so for the last few years, we really have seen more and more completed projects, really, really big, important ones. And I think that that's important to bring up as well, is that, we do have a long list, but we are chipping away at that list year by year by year. And as ACHD is constructing new roads, they're addressing a lot of the problems that weren't addressed in the past. And so it is exciting to see us moving forward. It is hard when there are so many ones that you do want to see. But I think that these are really, really good projects. I'm excited to see some of the ones in South Boise. And I think that really looking at Orchard, which is one of our most dangerous road configurations you can have, 4-lane roads with no turn lane in the middle, is proven to be one of the deadliest kind of roads across the country. And I think it's one of our last remaining ones here in Boise along a big business corridor. So those, I think, are all really, really great projects.
Madam Mayor,
Who's that? Oh.
it's me,
Who's that?
Todd.
I'm sorry. I didn't know that the council president was online. I don't think any of us did.
I'll show you my face for a minute, but I'm not feeling great.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry you're not feeling well.
I'm going to go off camera now, but I'm still here.
Yes, please do.
Could you clarify what direction you're seeking today and what opportunities we might have to weigh on this formally between now and the 15th?
Madam Mayor, Council President, the action today is to affirm the list that we've provided to you, the requested list. It's on that back page with all the highlighted ones on it. Those are the ones I talked about today. And either give us any direction to reorder those or add comments to those. And if you could get me those comments by Friday, that would be ideal. And then that would be the list we submit to ACHD. And it is accompanied by a letter from Mayor McLean that explains the priorities, explains what we did. So we also have an opportunity to underscore with a little bit more narrative what projects you might find important. So if you have any you would like to call out in that, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, Madam Mayor, I'd just like to make a couple comments on this.
Sure.
First of all, there's a sidewalks on Allenbaugh from Northview to Fairview. There's some ACHD comments related to it's not being feasible to do this on the east side. It's my understanding that if sidewalks were put on the east side, that there would be a number of trailers in a trailer park that would have to be removed. I want to make sure that the city's position on that is not would not be advocating for that type of land use decision. So if we could just make sure that those notes are consistent with that. Additionally, it's my understanding that ACHD received some federal funds that might be helpful in a study of the intersection at Glenwood and Mountain View Drive, which is near Capitol High. This is not something that's on the list, but given that Goddard Linear Park is going in right in there, and then the new road we've just built at Spalding Ranch connects to Glenwood and its proximity to Capitol High. I would be interested in your feedback, Bree, on whether a study like that would warrant inclusion on a list, and maybe we can connect about that before Friday. But it's my understanding there might be some funding at ACHD available to study that.
Madam Mayor, Council President, I'll get you the information I have so far about the work that ECHD is doing on Goddard through their RAISE project and maybe the projects that are surrounding that. On the Allenbaugh one, I know we've given the impression that it's a very scientific process, but it's also part art. So if we put the request on there that we want a sidewalk facility in this area, we are saying some type of facility that is comfortable for pedestrians in this area. It could look like a literal sidewalk, or it could be an asphalt pathway. It could be some gravel. It doesn't necessarily mean it will impact any property or homeowners in the area. So just to clarify that one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or feedback?
Just a quick clarifying question on the list that we have here on the back. What are the highlighted projects? Are those the ones we want to, are those our selected projects as a city?
Those are the ones I talked about today.
Oh, just the ones you talked about.
Mhm.
So, okay. Thank you,
Yeah.
Bree.
Madam Mayor, I have a technical question, and maybe because Colin is having a hard time speaking, that maybe Meredith can take this. So if we have opinions on this, do we send it through council leadership? Do we send it to you? And then we're going to come back to a work session? Like, give me some of the.
Sorry, what needs to happen is Bree's seeking feedback now. The changing in ranking requires, that requires pushing things back. So what Bree's asking is for an affirmation of direction. If there are comments that you have, as Councilmember Halliburton provided on 15th Street with more clarity on direction, that is helpful because we can build that in, and that's something that you can get to Bree by Friday. If there are other things that you would like Bree to take a look at, you may share those by Friday. And then Bree will be able to take a look at those with the team to determine whether or not it's feasible, and with ACHE to determine whether or not it's feasible to put on this list or if it should go into a different bucket/list for future discussion. And with that, I'm getting nods. So I'm going to take this as a firm direction. Bree, be looking for feedback. And then when I have that, when we have all of that, we'll be sure to get that back to you all for eyes on. And then I'll share the letter as it's drafted with that narrative with leadership to take a look at too. Thanks, Bree. Really appreciate this work. And thanks for being here still from ACHD, and really appreciate the collaboration and the opportunities. And Councilmember, you were right to point out all the projects that have been completed. We've seen a lot of activity the last couple of years, and I appreciate it. All right. And now Sarah Arkell is up with us. So we've talked about this in passing at some different hearings, or not hearings, but in different work sessions, about having a discussion about how the parks happen, in that, we have developed, and this is information / an orientation that our Parks Board often gets too, is that we can buy a piece of land because it's in the right place and we know it'll open, safe park access within 10 minutes to 1,000 families, but that doesn't mean it's parked tomorrow. There's a long process that we have to go through. And I can tell you this from experience because I was on my 20s and on the parks in my 20s on the Parks Board. And we're still seeing the results of some of those conversations I was having in my 20s when I was a member of the Parks Board. And so I asked Sarah to come because park development, and Doug is here as well, is a long, it's a long timeline. There's both like forethought and strategy in terms of, where we ought to be looking for land while it's available. And then the long process of making sure that we've got funds programmed at certain times, and impact fees come into play, and that capital improvement plan that we've talked about in some work sessions definitely comes into play. And it's why you see, just like with ACHD, things programmed a ways out. So I wanted Sarah and Doug to be here to walk through that process with all of us as we start to look at, what's been planned. We can better answer questions of why it takes so long to get the funds in the bank to do some of these things that we have planned, and ultimately will feed into some of the budget discussions that we have moving forward. So thanks, Sarah, for being here.
Madam Mayor, thank you for that excellent introduction. I'm happy to be here. This is like my passion and my life. So getting the opportunity to talk about it for longer than 30 seconds at a dinner party is very exciting for me. So welcome to Park Development. I'm Sarah Arkle. I'm the Parks Resources Superintendent. So I have the privilege of leading the team that plans for, builds, designs, and maintains our 96 park sites, 28 miles of greenbelt, and all sorts of other wonderful assets. So park development overview. This is the dinner party version, right? We acquire a piece of property. We go out to the community to ask them what types of features they'd like to see within that park based on the budget that we have identified available. We construct the park, and then we cut a ribbon and we maintain it onward, and and have a long-term commitment to caring for that park, the grounds, and the features therein. Now, if this were the end of it, it would be a very simple, tidy project that we could attribute a very clean timeline to. But the spice is in the details. And what we're going to talk about for the next half hour or so are all of the different things that affect scope, affect timeline, affect siting, and affect public engagement. So the 6 points that are identified here are the pieces that we're going to walk through today for the next few minutes. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to stop me. I'd be happy to answer them to the best of my ability. So as the mayor mentioned, there's a lot of strategy and forethought that goes into siting a new park or new park features. And budget availability, budget constraints is an integral part of that planning process. We'll talk about how we acquire property once we've strategically identified an area and have identified a budget source. Obviously, the 10-minute walk initiative is a key part of that property acquisition and property identification. We'll talk about budget development in specifics. I'll go into impact fees to the best of my ability. Thankfully, we have some members of the Department of Finance Administration here if you happen to have any questions that I can't answer. And then we'll go into the outreach process, governed and informed by our budget. And then finally, development and our ongoing investment and reinvestment commitment. So where do we locate new parks, and how do we identify parks that need new features? These two factors, prioritizing based on equity and need and identifying available funding mechanisms, go hand in hand. One is not more important or more valuable than the other. Both of these factors have to be addressed and identified in order for us to move forward with seeking to acquire a property. Available funding mechanisms. Obviously, there's the city budget, and we'll talk about that in a minute. We do often apply for grant dollars, whether it's community district block grants or land and water conservation funds. There are funds available. They just have constraints associated with them. And then we are fortunate enough to live in a community where there is a strong support for parks and park features. And often we find ourselves the recipients of donations. Very, very grateful for those private dollars that help support our park programs. So once we have
identified an area that is deficient, so to speak, or is in need of new park features or new parks. Again, driven by that 10-minute walk. We've got about 70% of our community that is able to walk 10 minutes to a park or an open space. So we're looking for those 30% of folks to help, drive our future investment. Couple of ways we can acquire property, land purchases. Obviously, that's a wonderful benefit and driven through previous levy efforts. Shamrock Park site was the most recent park property that we purchased in 2023. It was, as you said, there $800,000 of levy funds, open space and clean water levy funds were utilized. This particular park site is along the Shamrock Bikeway. So we do what we can, again, to, prioritize acquisitions in areas where we know we have some aligning goals. We also have property that's donated to us. Believe it or not, most of the Ribbon of Jewels parks, those were donated properties to the city from philanthropic families who had an ethic to provide public space. And most recently, 2019, Sue Howell Park site was donated, and that's upstream of the Alta Harris Park site in the Barber Valley. And then, of course, for new park features, we are always grateful for the donations of our partners. I don't know how many of you were able to attend the Molinar Skate Park opening and ribbon cutting, but that was probably one of the most fun events I've ever been to. And that was in thanks to a $1 million donation from the J.A. and Catherine Albertson's Family Foundation. So we've acquired property, right? We've strategically determined where we need a park site or new park features. How do we build out a budget? Well, we're having discussions about available funding sources, sometimes decades prior to those available funding sources being available. And I'm going to talk about
Projected funding sources
That's right.
that will one day be available.
That's correct, Madam Mayor. Thank you. We look at what's projected to be available within certain areas and then try and align that again with what our needs are. And the driver of those strategic investments is impact fees. Impact fees are collected through growth and development within a planning area, and they are dedicated funding sources for new parks and new park facilities built to service that new growth. So hopefully you were all able to look through the impact fees plan that was adopted in 2022, but that is really our improvement plan based on the main driver, which supports and dedicated funding towards new parks and new park facilities, which is impact fees. Oftentimes, those projections either don't pace with construction and development pricing, or they don't pace with growth and development. And so there's a constant conversation that's being had between our finance folks over at the Department of Finance and our parks planning folks to determine when are impact fees going to be available and line up those programmed projects for when those impact fees are available. We have other sources of funding that can potentially close the gap should impact fees not be enough in any given year to complete an entire project. But each of those other funds have their own constraints, and so I'll take each one of them kind of slowly here. The general fund, as you well know by now, supports all of our equipment. It supports all of our existing properties and the investments that need to be made to ensure that those features are up to date and not going by the wayside. Unfortunately, this parking lot picture is an example of a parking lot that needs to be fixed, and we are fixing it right now. But that general fund is where we go to for major repair and investment projects, where we go to for our equipment, where we go to for staffing. So that is a very, that fund is utilized in a lot of ways for parks. Levy funds, as you're aware, we've been fortunate enough the last 20 years to have levy funds available for parks and open space acquisition, and in some cases improvement projects. Finally, donations and grants. I think I've talked about that a little bit. All of these are used generally to try and resource under-resourced projects, fill that gap where impact fees are not enough.
And I want to say something here too. On the general fund piece, maintenance is flagged. And what we're looking at doing with the budget now is we don't just build a park and then it's a park that's left alone forever. So we've got to program into our future years that maintenance operation and ultimately at times the replacement. So the improvement and investments in parks that already exist, new playgrounds, what have you. So there's funds that are needed at the beginning, but then there's funds that are needed throughout. And then I think Sarah said it, but on an earlier slide, but as some of you saw with the golf course, not a park, but the golf course, we're not going to call it a club because it's not just for golfers.
Grill and golf, Mayor?
The place that we can all go gather. That moved up because we had a donor. And the Sue Howell Park has moved from a planning perspective because we have a donor. So if somebody arrives and they want to partner with us, so public-private partnership with philanthropists, we take advantage of that opportunity while still chipping away at the long-term plans that we have.
Thank you, Mayor. So now that we've identified a funding source, we have a property. When we're lining up that programming to when the projected funding becomes available, we begin to initiate a master planning process. And the Charles F. McDevitt Youth Sports Complex master plan effort is underway as we speak. The funds were projected to be available in fiscal year 25, and so we began a master planning project in 24 so that we could be responsive and provide timely, public input for those dollars. Our design and development team takes the available budget and builds out sort of an amenity menu where they can go to the public then and say, based on the budget we have for your new park or your new park features, these are the items that you can, select for to be developed. We're really proud of our process at this time. It requires a lot of work from our communications team and our design team, but we find it to be really effective. Charles F. McDevitt, as an example, will send out a survey to get an idea of what type of experience folks want to have with their park. Give them the menu, they select it, and then we build out design alternatives that they can vote on in a second phase. We had over 800 folks participate in the initial survey and even more participate in the voting on the alternatives. So we're really pleased with that process. I think it's a great way to help guide folks through what can be pretty complicated, right? So we have the master plan that is then generated based on public feedback goes to the Boise Parks and Recreation Commission for approval, and then that becomes our concept for development. Development and initial investment requires obviously multiple phases. We have to take that concept and turn it into construction documents. Sometimes during that process, we might find that the budget that we have is not sufficient, and so we might have to go back and ask for additional impact fees within that planning area to the impact fee committee and to council, or we might be able to use one of those other funding sources to help resource that project. And then, of course, as the mayor mentioned, we have to have a strategy for ongoing enhancement and investments. A playground, for example, lifespan is about 15 years. So we have to be planning ahead for either reinvesting in that park and that playground or improving those features as they age. And that's a good segue into our ongoing care and investment. I can't say enough about the team of folks who are on the front line every day who clean the bathrooms, empty the trash cans, talk with folks in the parks, make sure that the ground's in good condition, the irrigation system is working. I mean, it's a lot of work in 96 park sites, right? But age, condition, and equity are guiding how we reinvest and invest in our parks and their maintenance. I showed you a picture earlier of that Julia Davis parking lot. If you're familiar with that area, it's right behind the Discovery Center. And for many, many years, there's been a lot of potholes and crumbling asphalt. And we were thankfully finally able to get in this year, right now, actually, and replace that parking lot. That's one of our flagship parks. From an event perspective, Tree Fort obviously is its home. Or its home, Tree Fort calls it home, I guess I should say. And so we're really proud to be able to put money into a needed investment there. Hewitt Park Playground is another reinvestment that we are doing this year. The documents should go out to bid, I think, in the next 2 weeks.
That playground was put in 1997. We have some significant, and we can't even source the materials anymore for that playground. So it's wonderful to get in there, to put in a new playground, upgrade it so that it's ADA accessible. Those are the ways that we're trying to improve our park system. We are outward focused, customer service driven. The team is committed to exemplary service. And I'm really proud of the work that they do every day to make that a reality. So I walked you through the process. Hopefully that made some sense. I thought I'd give you an example. This is an example that's very timely. Primrose Park is off Gary Lane, in between State Street and Hill Road. It's a 1.5 acre park that was acquired by the city, believe it or not, in 1994 through impact fees. And at that point, there was an ongoing discussion about whether or not it would be appropriate for a fire facility or a park. And that discussion went on until there was projected funding, which was 2022, excuse me. And so in 2021, the council mayor decided it would be a park site after lots of conversations with the community. And so we had projected funding, a timeline. We went out and did a master planning process, specifically that process I lined out earlier. Built out 2 design alternatives. The community selected one. Because it had been, a little bit of time between when we had done the master plan effort and when we were able to construct, about a year. And I'm sure you're all aware that construction pricing has been very variable over the last 3 years. We did have to go and augment those impact fees. But thankfully there was available dollars within that planning area, and we were able to execute that with your approval. We are under construction now. If you get a chance to go by Gary Lane, it is very exciting. They're moving. So I would highly recommend it. This is a small park, 1.5 acres. Doesn't have a parking lot, doesn't have necessarily a dedicated restroom. There's a shelter, a fitness station, a walking path, a playground, and landscaping. And all of that was 1.1 million. Just a gauge of how much money you need to do what we need to get done in these parks properties. So I can pause there if you have any questions about the process or if anything I said wasn't clear. And then I'd be very happy to provide you with some project updates based on what was discussed at council last week.
Madam Mayor, thank you so much, Sarah. There's a lot to discuss here, and we love our parks in Boise. And thank you for calling out the custodial staff, because that's also a really hard job, and that makes such a huge difference in how folks interact in our parks when they're clean and when folks do that really difficult work. I wanted to talk a little bit about the public outreach and how important that is. I have really appreciated the public outreach for Charles McDevitt, because I think it gives, for a number of different reasons, but first and foremost, it gives, yeah, of course. Yep, you bet. It gives folks a reason to be involved. And we all know that people are busy. And I have just seen that energize folks, particularly in West Boise, to have dreams about what is possible within the budget. And as you alluded to, prices are going up. But I appreciate that there are multiple steps to that and many opportunities for people to get involved, because it will create folks who feel like they have more influence, more voice, and that their opinions matter in things that are really near and dear to them, which could be the park next door. So thank you for doing that, because it's a lot of extra work. I appreciate it.
Madam Mayor, Council Member, thank you. And if I may take a moment to, our communications team does a really good job of providing both online and in-person opportunities to provide feedback and utilizing social media platforms to make sure we're reaching out to as many folks as we can. So I will make sure to share that with them. Thank you.
All right, you can move into updates.
Oh, great. Okay, so I actually gave you a pretty good update, I think, on the McDevitt Youth Sports Complex development. We did send out a update to the community just this week, letting them know the results of their survey. So we are planning to go to the Boise Parks and Recreation Commission in April with that proposed master plan. It will be a public hearing. And we are planning to propose the build out of that master plan in our projections for fiscal year 25. So hopefully you will see that in the next few months. Spalding Ranch access. I know we've talked a little bit about this offline, and it was discussed in terms of transportation here this afternoon. We are right in the middle of construction associated with available impact fees for the access drive and sidewalk and utilities. This is a case where impact fees, as they get collected, then we can utilize them. 1.5 million were available in 2023. That's the impact fee dollars we're using right now for the access drive and bringing utilities to the site.
And does that include water when you say utilities?
Madam Mayor, it does. It does.
Okay.
And electricity and those sorts of things. And then 1.5 million will be available, I believe, in 2026, projected to be available in 2026. So obviously we can't do much until we bring utilities to the site. So it'll be good to see what's possible. And we're beginning the kind of conceptual discussion right now about additional features like where pathways would go within the site, and working with the mobility team on a potential pathway connection between Spalding Ranch and Capitol High School. That's the Tuttle connection that's referred to as in other plans. So that is moving forward. Again, that's another one great construction site to drive through or drive by, excuse me, and see the progress. The other thing I'd say about Spalding Ranch, we have been working, even though there were not impact fees available until 2023 to be utilized for infrastructure, we have been working over the last few years with our folks over in our open space division to make sure that the soil is available for planting. So there are things that we can do sometimes on sites that aren't necessarily impact fee driven, but help gain incremental progress. We did have a pumpkin patch out there this last October that was really encouraging and wonderful for the community.
I was going to ask, are we doing that again?
Madam Mayor, absolutely.
And everybody should go.
Everybody
It was the
should go.
coolest pumpkin patch I've ever been to. And there were kids that had just been born and like great grandparents there.
Yes.
Like the whole gamut. It was awesome.
It was a pretty special day, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Alta Harris Park. So this one, I know you've all talked about this a lot. I think from a park development perspective, we're projected to receive impact fees in fiscal year 2025 for but we know that those impact fees will not be enough to fully build out the park. So we're working on strategies right now with our team, with our partners, and obviously with the mayor's office to try and figure out how we can begin, like I said, to develop some incremental progress on this park as well. So more to come on that in the future. South and Lowell Pools. In the last month or two, I guess, we have begun to reignite the planning effort that will help update the alternatives and scope associated with those alternatives to bring back to you. Sean Wilson is the project manager for those updates and is working with our consultants now to ensure that we have actionable alternative options and realistic projected costs. And finally, Liberty Park reinvestment. I mentioned earlier that Hewitt Park is getting a new playground because that playground was built in 1997. Liberty Park is the other park that has a playground that was built in 1997. And so it's on our list. We know that it needs to be replaced. We know that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in Liberty Park, both with investing in existing features and also improving with new features. We are projecting through the capital improvement plan that impact fees will be available in 2027 for Liberty Park for new features. And I've heard a lot of interest from the community about a restroom facility at this park. We're aware that impact fees will likely not be enough. Available impact fees that are projected will likely not be enough for a restroom facility. So this is another one where we know we have some aligning needs, right? We need to reinvest in that playground. We realize there's an accessibility improvements that are needed and new features that are requested by the community. So we're investigating some federal grant dollars. This particular area is eligible for some federal grant dollars. So we're looking into those opportunities now, hopefully with some more clarity on timeline in 2026.
Thank you. And I just want to pick up on that, investigating whether or not there are federal grant dollars available. So just like the donations would make things possible faster, grants will too. And we've asked all of our teams to take a look at, including our grants team, take a look at the capital improvement plans that we have for the city and overlay that with potential grant opportunities to see if there's a way to bring in more dollars, advance work more quickly, but importantly, free up the dollars that have been planned to then be able to meet other needs for the community. So appreciate that you're looking at that with Liberty as well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My hope is that you'll leave today with a better understanding of kind of how we cite and budget for new parks and plan for them. And then also understand that those budget constraints are real and that anytime we have a plan in place, you know, we've been working on that for obviously a long time and are really excited to try and find opportunities to grow our parks and make sure that we're committing to them in the long term so that they're the best they can be for our community. So thanks for having me tonight.
Madam Mayor?
I've got
Okay.
Oh,
Councilmember
questions.
Halliburton,
Okay.
then Willis.
Sorry.
Madam Mayor, thank you. I keep forgetting that 1997 is a long time ago. And so when you talk about it, it's like, well, that's not that bad. And then I realize I'm older than I think that I am. There's a saying that I'm going to get wrong, and it's something like the best day to start building was yesterday, and the second best day is today. And I think about that a lot with our parks, and I especially think about that a lot with development fees over the last 4 years. I think that I sort of benefited from being on council at the very beginning of 2020 because we were able to actually start moving a lot of parks and stuff forward because we had funding and stuff available to do it. And then rapidly things got more and more expensive. Sometimes 2 times, sometimes 3 times as much it was going to cost. So I guess my question is like, as the costs have gone up so significantly for everything, and a lot of our parks we had planned using development fees, did we get a larger gap because of that growth in cost during this period of time? And is that gap just going to continue to be big, or is it starting to shrink? Do you have any insight there?
Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, yeah, that's a great question, and you're absolutely right. The rapid increase in construction costs and labor costs required us to scramble a little bit. And within each impact fee planning area, there is a budget. So if we have a park that's in development but is under-resourced, we can go to the Development Impact Fee Committee and ask to reorganize the funding within that planning area to support a park that is in development, but that does push out further parks that are projected to be funded. So that impact fee plan does have some fluidity to it based on A, how fast that planning area is growing, because that impacts the amount of funding that we will project, and then B, what's happening in the world at that time, right? What can we fund? But we do our darndest to scope projects to the available budget. And so if we are coming up to a development cycle where we're under-resourced, it's because something significant has shifted.
Yep. I would say that I'm really proud of how scrappy our parks team has been in continuing to move projects forward during a time when it's been so expensive. And we have been lucky to get a lot of private donations. The J. Catherine Albertson Foundation obviously being a major one that's helped us move some projects forward and some grants. And then we've been so lucky to have the use of those levy funds as well. And I guess that's just something I hope that we continue to explore as we try to overcome this whole how we can leverage all of the different types of funding sources that might be out there to get kind of caught up on some of these projects and make that whole just a little bit smaller, because we want to get more parks in there in every single neighborhood and get that 10-minute walk percentage like higher and higher and higher. And I think that we're doing great, but I do think that we've ran into a challenging few years with the way that costs have gone up.
The other thing I appreciate those comments. And in addition to going to the Impact Fee Advisory Committee to look at the budgets, you'll remember that twice in the last 4 years, the Impact Fee Advisory Committee came to us with recommendations that we raise impact fees. So they're constantly looking at the reality on the ground as well to ensure that we're collecting the appropriate amount of fees for development to make possible things like parks in the long run.
Madam Mayor, Sarah, $1 million in 1994 is not the same as $1 million in 2024. When we look at how we develop the budget and the impact fees for the parks, can you provide me some clarity? Are we determining that there'll be $1.3 million in 1994 for whenever we get to it? Talk to us about how that number is derived and how long we have to wait.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Willetts. So when the city acquired the property in 1994, it was through, impact fee dollars that were projected at that time. That 1.1 million in today's dollars was for the construction of the park. So I think, I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
Let me provide some clarity. At what point are we determining the money that is available in the impact fee for the particular park? Is it at the beginning, or is it at when we're like, okay, we have money within this and this is how we need to divvy it up? I'm trying to figure out the timing of it.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Willetts, thank you for that clarification. So the impact fee plan that was adopted in 2022 projects out to 2031, I believe. And so like I said, I work in partnership with the Department of Finance Administration to look at what's identified within that planning area per park for those projected impact fees. So sometimes the timeline is very extended based on the growth in that area. Sometimes it's a little quicker, but that impact fee plan is what's identifying how much money should go to which park and which planning area. That's what we follow.
Okay. I'm going to get with you separately for some clarification, but I did have one other question. Have we done any sort of analysis on what it would take with everything that we've bought to date and everything that people are waiting for? Because to Councilmember Halliburton's comment, we love our parks. This is an important part of this community. What's the backlog? What would it take? Like if we had Santa Claus come to, like if we're going on that metaphor, like what's the gap?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Willetts, I think the impact fee plan is probably the best place to look for identified gaps. In terms of projecting out future costs, the longer you project out, the more variable that projection is. So we look at a 1 to 4 year time frame where we feel we can get really solid cost estimates for projected new parks or projected new features, and use that as our gauge for scoping to the available budget. Does that make sense? And I'm happy to follow up, and hopefully Travis can help, and he's happy to answer any questions as they relate to impact fees if you'd like.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. It's helpful to know that parks are not created overnight, and even if land's identified and has been there and a plan's identified, that it does take a lot to go with that. And costs are a huge driver. I do want to thank so much the city and the parks team for the work at Molinar Park specifically. It's an area town that was just desperate for a new park. That park is wonderful. I mean, there are kids there all the time, winter, summer, spring. The skate park is being utilized immensely by a lot of kids, and would love to see some more development, of course, as we all would in these areas. One question I do have is, do we have a list of the land that has been donated by people to the city of Boise for potential use for parks?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Corliss, I believe that we do have a list in our property files of those properties that have been donated. And if that's something you'd like to look through, we're happy to provide that for you.
And I think too, a follow-up, Sarah, would be, we've seen over time when we're making acquisition decisions where we need to acquire to meet our 10-minute safe walk to a park goal. But in that map that we've had the occasion to see now with this new council are also the dots of where the land is that's helping us meet that goal that's not yet developed. So perhaps in addition to that list of land that's been donated, a map or a list of land that we've acquired with plans in the long run to be able to create parks to help us advance that 10-minute walk to a park goal. What are we at now? I mean, since we set that goal,
Madam Mayor, 70%.
we're at 70? Okay. the department working with Adon, our real estate guru here in the city, I don't know what his title is, working closely together to target land that might come available, or Adon seems to always know when it's about to be available or potentially available, to help us tick away at that goal. But as Councilmember Halliburton said, there's that still means we've got 30% of our kids that can't yet. And so that's what's driving our intense interest in acquiring more, getting to a point where we know what needs to be developed, so we can say to the community, these are the investments we need, if once we've determined what we can do with the budget that we have.
Madam Mayor, really quick, could you just clarify that 10-minute walking distance, what sites you're taking into account for that 70%? So is that only city parks? Does that include private development, green areas? Does that include, school yards, anything else beyond just our parks?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Morales, great question. We work with the Trust for Public Lands. They have an algorithm that helps us identify that, what's within a 10-minute walk. And the criteria is that it is open space or park space that is publicly available. So we have an agreement with the school district, for example, to utilize and share facilities. So in some cases, the school district property might be counted as within a 10-minute walk, in addition to either an adjacent or nearby park property. But if it's a privately owned park space that's not, expressly open to the public, it would not be included.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Madam Mayor, one more comment. I know when we were building out Molinar Park, specifically the splash pad, we had a little bit of a delay, mainly due to COVID. But because we couldn't find, as I understood it, somebody who wanted to take on such a small project at that time, it was just putting in the splash pad. I would strongly encourage the city to maybe take a look where we have other projects that we could combine together that would bring an economies of scale for the contractors to bid on, to provide a little bit more meat on the bone, if you will, to get these projects utilized and completed in a costly manner. Yeah. Right.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Corliss, thank you. I will definitely chat with the team about those options.
Madam Mayor, I do have one more thing really quick. I know we're trying to get out of here. And it's kind of in lines with, I think, Councilmember Willet's question, trying to figure out like what that big dollar amount is really hard to do. It would be nice to know with our existing parks, how many of them still have $1 million projects left in them. So like, and maybe $1 million isn't the right amount, but like how many parks are still have a major project on them that aren't completed, so that we know kind of what that backup is, and what we're kind of waiting on to be completed in some of our parks that have gotten started.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, just to clarify, there are, there's the new features list, and then there's the reinvestment list.
And I think it's more like the features that we've already planned, that we're waiting to incorporate.
So the new features
Yep.
that would be guided through impact fee dollar investment.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Sarah, thank you. Appreciate it. We're going to recess. We'll be back here at 6 o'clock, and look forward to the evening. Thanks all.